To everybody because I am we see people have joined from different parts of the world. When we looked at the registration, we found that 38 countries the participants are coming from around the world, and some parts of the world is almost their bedtime. So in part of where we are in Atlanta, Georgia. It's morning 10 o'clock for us. So that's why it's a good day for all of you. We thank you for joining for today's webinar on learning the ropes of roasting with Alain de Beauville. And first, I just want to give you a brief introduction of CocoaTown. Yeah, I think most of you might have heard about CocoaTown, but if you're not very familiar, because we also found out, a lot of the participants are not our customers. So we thought we'll just give you a brief introduction. The parent company InnoConcepts was founded in 1992, and we just started trading innovative specialty food processing machines. We named our company before we even decided what we are going to sell. That's why it's called InnoConcepts. We didn't want to sell Me Too products. We wanted to make a difference. We wanted to do innovative. So that's why it's InnoConcepts, because we did not know, is it going to be a product, service? We don't know. So that's why we said InnoConcepts. And then we looked at some of the grinders, from India. That was a new model coming in, and it revolutionized the way people using the wet grinder. So we took 2 years to convince the manufacturers that we are eligible to be their representative of USA. We were the exclusive distributor for them. So we were selling these grinders that is specially made for making South Indian food called idli and dosa. And then when people buy, we are, because I started from home business and then grew into the bigger business. So I used to do everything as a small business. And when people buy, if I don't recognize the South Indian name, I call them and ask them, hey, what are you using it for? And then we collected the database of what people are using differently. And then in 2007, the recession hit. We had warehouse full of machines and no sales. So we wanted to know how to survive. So we wanted to pivot. So we thought when we pivot, also it has to stay true with our vision of being innovative and also making a difference. So we found out some people were using for masa, some people were making for Filipino delicacy called puto, Nepalese delicacy, chatamari, things like that, lot of different things. And then what picked our brain was few of the people, like five of them, were using it for making chocolate. We said, wow, chocolate, okay. Because the Mexican food and other things, it's not like a routine food. People, not everybody is familiar how to make them. Even either like the masa, even though they grind the corn, that this wet grinder, but not most of the people were, buying the masa harina, the powder, and making it. So we thought, okay, we have to make a difference. So we called the people who were using it for chocolate. We asked them, what is the pinch point? How they are using? They said that they have to grind the cocoa nibs for 3 days because these wet grinders were originally designed for running 20 minutes batches, two batches in a day, or sometimes once a week, 3 days a week, something like that. But they said they have to grind the cocoa nibs for 3 days so it melts in your mouth. And they had to be MacGyvers. So they had to make a lot of modification to this basic grinder to make it work for the chocolate making. So when Balu was in a pharmaceutical industry, he has a PhD in chemistry. Then he said, "Okay, I like to design machines. So you do your craft, which is making chocolate, and I will do the machines for you. So you don't have to be MacGyver, and it will also break the barrier, and many people can enter the industry." That's when we decided to, focus on the CocoaTown. And in 2009, we formed the company, yeah, under the parent company, Concepts CocoaTown, to differentiate the idli grinders and the chocolate grinders because they are world apart. It looks the same. It looks like there are two stones and a drum, but they are not same. So Other thing also we found is the cocoa farmers were not being compensated right because they had to sell their beans in a commodity market, whereas the small batch bean to bar makers, they had a direct relationship with the farmers. They were paying more than what the commodity prices. So we were the side effect of this was also for cocoa farming is becoming more sustainable because even in 2009 2010 when we visit countries, when we see the farmers, the average age was 65, but now at least in South America and the Philippines, couple of countries we visit, the youngsters are interested in farming. So I think that's a good change. And then this is like a small timeline of our company through the years. So we were 1994 we introduced the wet grinders because it took 2 years to formulate the business and convince the manufacturers. And in 2007 we also sold the commercial machines because before that people were using the tabletop machines to testing and small making this chocolate in small scale. And then we over the years we added the other machines because people wanted the other machines at affordable prices. So we added the cracker, winnower, everything now we have. And we also have the patents on our machines. And in 2020, we had to pivot again because this time it's not just US had recession, the whole world was a standstill because of the unfortunate pandemic. And we had some tough times, but at least we could survive. But we found a lot of our small businesses, our customers, and other chocolate makers, even though they are not our customers, because but still they were struggling. And even though they are not our customers, but indirectly they are helping farmers. That's more important for us. So we said we will open up this education part, and we will teach people to do it better, to add more value for their products and go up in the economic chain. And then we started with talking to the people we know that we have networked over the years, and everybody was happy to help us. And today, Alain will be talking about roasting because roasting is the important part. And with that, so the new objective is now we are trying to educate more and more, and also we are coming up with some evaluation tools, and we also thinking of creating the CocoaVersity to provide resources because there's a cocoa bean to bar chocolate industry is still a fledgling industry. So not many people are there, and the resources are not very limited. So we wanted to pull everything in one place so it will help people. And also we are trying to develop new machines and accessories. Because of the last year pandemic, we had to put that on back burner. Hopefully, by next year we will have more, machines and accessories. And then the future, yes, we are hoping we will return back to the normal life. The pandemic also taught us that you can reach people all over the world with Zoom and everything is helping us. That was not possible earlier. When we travel, we meet some of our customers in that country. That's it. That's a limited exposure. But still, it's a face-to-face conversation we like, and meeting is very important. But now we are making the virtual connection, but we see that we will be continuing this virtual connection, and also we are looking forward to face-to-face meetings. And we just always want to finish with this called Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. It means may all beings everywhere in the universe be happy and free, and may the thoughts, words, and actions of my own life contribute in some way to the happiness and to that freedom for all. So we want you to all stay healthy, happy. Thank you so much. Now I will turn the mic to Teresa, and also Teresa, you can thank people on CocoaTown behalf.
Oh yes, yes. So I'm Teresa with CocoaTown, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I will just do a little bit of speak a little bit about housekeeping for our event today. What we would ask is that you'll put your questions in the chat. And as we go along, we will do our best to interrupt Alain at a most opportune time to see if we can get those questions answered for you. And then what we'll do at a future date is we'll get Alain to answer those questions in writing, and we'll send those out. It may not happen right away, but when he has some time, we'll get him to answer those questions, and we'll send them out to you, or we'll put them on our website as a blog post so that more people can get in contact with the information. We are recording today's event, so don't worry if we go too fast or we miss your question. We are going to record the event, and you'll be able to watch it at a later date. And with that, what I'd like to do just briefly is ask Alain a couple of questions just to get to know him a little bit. You know, we posted on our blog our Meet the Presenter segment, which gives, you know, a in-depth look at his background. And so if you can find that information there, but just for a little conversation's sake, what I wanted to ask you, Alain, is can you tell us just briefly how you got into chocolate, you know, sort of your start in chocolate?
Well, thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Anda. I was born in chocolate in the sense that as a kid in my family, we were always eating chocolate. It was something that I was very lucky to have. We had not every Sunday, but my mother would make chocolate mousse for major occasions, and I've always liked that. And later, when I went to school, going out of school at 4:30 or 5, whatever it was, we would go by the bakery and buy chocolate bread. So I've always had this attraction for chocolate. I've always eaten a fair amount of it. And I had a career in management, and eventually I went back to my very early days when I was a baby. Up to the age of 6 or 7, I was in Madagascar, and at 15 years ago, I had the opportunity to go back there. And I visited a cacao plantation that was owned by someone you might know, who has his own chocolate called Akesson, 𝗪𝗲𝗍𝗶𝗹𝗲 Akesson. I had known him socially, and I found it fascinating because the plantation doesn't smell chocolate, but it talks chocolate. It's warm, it's humid. You have those fruits, so you have the agricultural side of it, and when you chew a little bean, the fresh bean with the white pulp, it doesn't smell chocolate, but it feels good. I mean, there are aromas. It's a little bit sweet. The bean itself is not. And then there was a aha moment from this agricultural fruit to the chocolate bars and the many different chocolate products that I had experienced. And I was really fascinated of the whole process, what they were doing locally. And I decided that really I wanted to investigate and be involved in that kind of thing. Another aspect was also the people, because it's fairly labor intensive to grow cacao and to ferment it and produce beans. And all the people were very fascinating, very interesting. And those two elements made me decide to get into chocolate. So I initially, for a short period of time, I bought chocolate or liquor from the likes of 𝗄𝗶𝗵 or Valrhona, but that didn't satisfy my thirst for the aroma. I wanted to be closer to the bean. So I eventually bought a second-hand CocoaTown grinder and started my first chocolate, which had a lot of trial and error stages. But eventually, I decided to attend a good course about chocolate making in Trinidad, which is one of the best places for cocoa beans, for the trinatario. And after that, I invested a bit in machines and started to do it on a more professional volume. And I kept on traveling and meeting the bean, because my interest is really to go to the core of the product, which is the bean, the tree. And I was able to see a lot of, to go to various regions from Asia to South America, where I've been living for the last 15 years in the Caribbean. And the pandemic gave me the opportunity to write a book about it, because I had a lot of time on my hand. I couldn't travel, and I was still passionate about chocolate. So I gathered all my notes and I wrote a book about it. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, yes. I had a couple other questions, but you answered them all right there with what you shared. Thank you so much. Well, I won't take any more time with that, and I will turn the presentation over to you and let you share with us your knowledge and experience with roasting. So thank you.
Well, hello everyone again. So as everybody knows, roasting is one of the two key crucial stages or operation that you have to do to get good chocolate. The first one, of course, being fermentation, and the stage during which the bean is getting rid of its acidity and the germ is being killed so that it does not reproduce. So we're going to talk about the various reasons why we do that. Just bear with me. What we're going to go through is why we roast, the various methods of roasting, what is a roasting profile, why it is an art and not a science, and the link between roasting and aromas. So why we roast, there are three main reasons. The first one is to kill the bacteria, because during fermentation, well, that's the purpose of fermentation, to have a lot of bacteria to kill the germ and to get rid of the acidity. And after that, it gets into drying, but the drying sometimes, as you can see on this picture, for example, that was done in Haiti, the beans are being dried poorly because they're on a cement floor, which is bad because of the acidity of cement, and also because it's on the floor. And in a rural setting, on the floor, you may have dogs coming in and having a pee, or chicken, or rodents as well. So you may have all sorts of bad things. And that's why it's necessary with the temperature to get rid of all these, of the risk that they represent. The second reason is to get rid of the humidity. The beans, the international standard for moisture is 7%. So normally, when it leaves the farm, the beans don't have more than 7% humidity. But especially once you get them in the US, in Europe, or wherever, after 2-3 weeks in the belly of a big cargo boat, they may have gotten more moisture because of condensation, because of various temperature changes in the ship. So they may have, in fact, a little bit more than the regular 7%. So it's important to get rid of all the humidity before you actually grind them. And that's the second reason. And the third reason, that there's no hierarchy between those things, they're all important. And of course, the third one is the crucial one, because that's when you develop chocolate flavors, aromas. You have the amino acid that are transformed into chocolatey flavors. That's the first time, in fact, that you're in the whole chain of making the chocolate, that it starts smelling real chocolate. And it's one of the marker that you will be looking for when you're roasting to know when it's ready. It's when it starts smelling chocolate rather than other things. So these are the three reasons why we have to roast. Could we have the next slide, please? Hello?
Do you see the roasting methods?
Yeah, we go to the roasting method.
Yeah, that's the slide I have.
Okay, I don't have it in my screen, but
Teresa, can you see it?
Yeah, there may be a little bit of a delay. Alain.
Okay,
there might be a little bit of a delay.
Yeah, I have it now.
Yeah.
Okay, so the various method of roasting, the traditional one that was used by the Mayas or by the people in South America is on an open fire. If you put them on a frying pan and you move them, and it does the job, obviously, but for very small quantities. But it does dry, it does kill any potential bad germs, and develops aroma. So it's one option. Another option is to use the hot hair, which does the same thing like a hair dryer, a very hot hair dryer, and it also adds the winnowing step at the end because of the wind that will get rid of the husk. And of course, the more used one is an oven. We have two types of oven. You have ovens with trays, a little bit like the oven you have in your kitchen, which you can, by the way, use to roast your beans. So you put the beans on a tray, not too thick because they need to roast, and you can control the temperature. If you do that in your kitchen, I would highly recommend that you buy a special thermometer to monitor the temperature directly with your own thermometer. Usually the thermometer that comes with the cooker is not that accurate. So if you want, and you need accurate temperature readings. So that's the thing, but it works fine. And there are even industrial chocolate makers that use that kind of oven, huge sort of huge ovens. But the better process, because it delivers a more even heat, is of course with the drum. And you have different ones. I have here put two. The one on top right is from 𝗵𝗿. It's in fact a coffee roaster. It was designed for coffee. It has a tray at the bottom to get the skin of the coffee, which you don't need if you use it for cacao. It works fine. It has profile on the side, but it's very limited because you can't get more than 1.5 kilos at best. I mean, 3 pounds at best. Then the one from CocoaTown uses the same principle. It's a big drum, and you can monitor the temperature and sets, of course, the duration. And the last one you see on the right is a professional coffee roaster, which is very often used by big chocolate makers. All the big names in bean to bars, from dandelions to 𝗱'𝗷𝗶𝗍 in Europe, or they use that kind of roasting. It's a coffee, so it's a bit of an overkill in terms of monitoring all the elements, which is needed for coffee, but not as much for cacao. But of course, it works perfectly, and they may be up to 100 kilos per batch, which of course is a lot. So these are the 3 ways, but for bean to bars, usually you could use your own oven or a smaller drum type, like the one from CocoaTown. By the way, CocoaTown has 2 models, a bigger one and a smaller one. Could we have the next slide, please?
Alain, I think you can start talking because I changed it, but it's
okay. All right. Okay, then cooling. So the cooling. So why do we need to cool the beans? You've all seen afterwards. Well, it's fairly simple. It's to make sure that you control the whole process, because once you get the beans out of the oven, they're still hot or warm. Well, they're hot. And so they continue a little bit the process. So you need to cool them so that you stop the process, and you know exactly how long they've stayed at that temperature. It is important for cacao, but not as much as for coffee, because roasting coffee is at much higher temperature, because there is much fewer fat in the coffee than in the cacao. So, and the fat keeps the temperature, keeps its mass. And because the coffee beans are also much smaller than the cacao beans, so they can be cooled very quickly. The cacao beans, they're not, and they're not being heated as much. So it's important, but it's it's not, as I said, not as crucial. For coffee, it's something that they are very strict about, but it's not as essential, although it is important for cacao. So you've put your beans in, you know how long, you know at what temperature, and now we're going to see how what we monitor. The key thing, like for any stages in the cacao process, you need to write down what you're doing so that you can compare at the end the result with the process. So it's important to keep a little book on which you would write for each batch how much, the quantity, the top term, the profile you've used, if you've defined various profiles, which is a very handy thing to have 2 or 3 profiles, and then the chocolate bar you're going to do to test it and to make sure that you have what you're looking for. Could we have the next slide, please?
Alain, while we're waiting for the next slide, may I interject a question that we have?
Yes,
so someone is asking about, you spoke about the vinegar, getting rid of that vinegar scent, and someone is asking, does this mean that the vinegar scent is considered bad? Why do some claim vinegar scent as something to appreciate and look for?
I would say that vinegar as such, because it's not something you want. However, you have some bitterness, which is good, which can help appreciate other aromas. So the vinegar is really, gets rid at the fermentation stage. It smells really vinegar when you go into a fermentation center, and that's where it should stay. In your bean, you may want to have some bitterness, which is part of the bean, but not the acidity of the vinegar. I would not recommend vinegar in your chocolate.
And just one more question before we go on, since we were talking about the types of roasters. We have a question, do you have any thoughts about steam roasting?
Steam roasting? I've never encountered steam roasting, and I guess it would roast as well. I would be a bit nervous about the humidity, because the purpose of the roasting, as I mentioned initially, is to get rid of the humidity. So by adding steam, you would put some humidity in it, but I've never seen it. So I just, if it brings the temperature up, which it would obviously do, it would work, but you'd still need to get rid of the humidity at the end. You need a dry bean to put in the grinder.
Okay, thank you. Now I see you have your slide, so if you'd like to continue.
Yeah, so roasting profile. So I've put there a picture of various cocoa beans, and it's just to emphasize the fact that we're talking about an agricultural product which has many different realities. So some beans are bigger than others, some are fatter. The content of fat, for example, can range from 40% to in excess of 60% for some varieties. So that's, of course, very different, and that will result in a different roasting process. And also the beans themselves, of course, they're different. Some, to take a porcelana, which is very pale, which has very little acidity and has rather small beans, you won't roast that as long as Forastero, very violet and more bitter. So you have to know what you want, and you have to know what to start from. Unfortunately, I think where you can really see what the ultimate aroma will be is when you get the pod, the fresh pod on the trees, and you eat a little bit of the white pulp. The white pulp doesn't smell chocolate, as I said, but it has all the ingredients that will eventually transfer to the bean during fermentation and then to the chocolate. So that gives you an idea of what your chocolate could be. But of course, if you buy the beans, you don't have that. You get the beans that are dry, and they don't really smell chocolate as much. But you can see what they smell if they're big, if they're dry, and what you're looking for. If you're doing a single origin, you will want the original aromas as much as possible. So you don't want to get rid of many aromas. You want to have them. If you want to add to a blend, which you think is too fruity or too bland, you might want to roast it a bit more to get it to add some more aroma. So it depends. You have to try, and that's the key in the presentation. It's a trial and error process. That's why you have to write down the beans you start with, the process, the duration, and everything, and the aromas you feel in the very end. The high-end bean to bars, they very, very often make 4 or 5 chocolate bars before actually deciding on a profile, because that's the only way to do. Otherwise, you don't know if you could improve on what you get. So it's very important to write down all those elements. And the elements are, of course, the maximum temperatures, the aroma that you will want to experience before you switch off, or before you say it's done, the speed of temperature changes, the duration, and you decide all this on the actual appearance, and I'm feeling the sensory appearance of your beans. It's an essential step. Could we have the next step, please? The next slide.
May I take this moment to ask a quick question? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. We have a question about roasting and nutrient degradation. What are your thoughts? High and fast or low and slow?
Definitely low and slow. Well, I have a slide about it later on, but the nutrient are not really damaged by a lower temperature during a shorter period of time. Of course, if you roast at 180 Celsius for 40 minutes, yeah, you're damaging them. You won't get rid of all of them, but you'll have much fewer. So definitely low and slow.
Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that.
Okay. So, no, you've gone too far. Could we have the previous one? Okay, so finding the right profile, well, what I was saying earlier, you find it by trying, and you make an assessment depending on the variety, the type, the humidity. And the humidity is a very important factor, because even in a bag, you don't know how long your bag has been waiting at the warehouse, or even in your own storage place. So it may have different levels of humidity, and this is a key element you have to take care of. And of course, what you want, as I was saying earlier, you need to have an idea of what you want. Can we get the next one? So the chocolate profile, and that's easy to make on a piece of paper. Essentially, you can do a graph like I showed earlier, with the duration and the temperatures reached at each stage. How do you know when it's done? Well, the key thing is the aroma. Well, you're there, you're going to smell something. The noise. So they are popping noise. So it's if you have 1 or 2, it may not be ready. It's just 1 or 2. It may be a smaller bean, or one that was more humid and it did pop up. If it's like a machine gun, it's probably too late, because you have them all and you don't want that. That's too far. But A few is an indication that you've reached the end of the process. And of course, you can take out in your, especially if you have a small roaster that allows it, to take a little sample and you chew and see how it is. See if it's if you really have the cacao aroma, the chocolate aromas that you were looking for, and that you may have been able to identify while you were chewing the white pulp of the bean back in the field a few months earlier. Here on this picture, you have the yellow ones are in fact coming out of fermentation, and this is a forastero, that is the fact that it is violet is indicative of more acidity. The pale ones have a lower level of acidity. And of course, after that, that's the dried beans at the bottom. Could we have the next slide, please? So here I'll give examples of roasting profiles. This one is, I called it a little bit negatively roasting instead of aroma. There is for what I would call low-grade cocoa beans, which are usually fairly more solid. They tend to be more acidic and bitter, and they have a lower level of aroma. And they may even have unwelcome flavors like fumes. Depending on the season, some farmers have to use dryers to dry their beans because there's not enough sun at the time they're harvesting. So they use dryers, and some of the dryers do catch fumes of the heat. They may even have some chemicals depending where they're stored. Some have rots. If you have huge quantities, it's not uncommon. So all these are, of course, negative characteristic. And by heavily roasting them or burning them, you get rid of those, or most of these bad flavors. So that's something that is fairly common, especially for industrial cacao, or chocolate, sorry, where they want to produce a constant aromas. You know, when you buy a chocolate bar from Cadbury or Lindt, I think it always has the same aromas. You know what you're getting, which is good for bakers or pastry chef. They know what they get. But the only way to obtain that is to sort of manipulate the aroma, not get the aroma from the bean, but to mix, to blend, and to play with among other things, the roasting to get always the same aroma. So in this profile, the duration would be what I would call fairly long, in half an hour, and also at a pretty high temperature at some stage, up to 180 Celsius. And that would be typical for a forastero, not necessarily a bad one, but it's because the beans are bigger and it's more sturdier. You would apply this kind of profile. So in your machine, some of the machines have memories, and you can enter those data so that automatically it goes up to the temperature you set at the time you want. Could we have the next slide, please? So the next slide is the total opposite. It's when you have what I would call a fragile and aromatic beans. Think of a Nacional or Porcelana, or these things. They're very pale. They're rather small. They don't have a lot of pulp, and you really want their aroma. You don't want to hide anything. You know they're good, and so you essentially would start with a higher temperature at the beginning, not for a long time, just to get the skin off, because that's one of the purpose, to have the husk well detached, and then have it at a much lower temperature for maybe 15 minutes. If it's a very good bean, that's personally that's what I've done on various chocolate bars like this one, and that would enhance or would leave all the aromas of the bean without burnt or without hiding characteristics. So it all depends on what you want. You need a very good bean to do that, and you have a result that's close to the fruit. It's a different thing from the one I was mentioning before. And if you apply, for example, this profile, I don't think you'd lose much nutrients. As I said, the nutrients, they're never completely lost. They're reduced, that's for sure. But you'd still get some. It's not like eating nibs, but I mean, raw nibs, but it's nearly the same. You'd have as much of the famous flavonoids and good, happy ingredients of the chocolate. Do you have questions on this?
Yes, we have a question in regard to, okay, the question is, most high roasting taste burnt. How do we differentiate with this and over roasting?
Well, some people, because of the low quality of their bean, would like to have it burnt. And so it might be sometime, especially if you're working on a blend, it might be something you're looking for. Whereas over roasting is really when your bean is cooked and the skin is burnt, and the inside is really even a bit powdery, which is really, you've jumped on the other side of the horse. It's too much. That's really over roasting. The burnt side would be more surface, and as I said, could sometimes be welcome. Okay, so that's the one about the nutrient. Teresa, do we have more questions on that?
Yeah, we have a question that, so I guess in the case of when you're not using a drum roaster, someone would like to know, do they need to stir the beans while they're roasting in the oven?
Yes, because the surface that is on the tray will have more heat because of the metallic surface. The problem with that is that to do this, you have to open the door of the oven, which brings the temperature down. So you have to do it at the right time, and you have to be conscious of this lowering temperature. But yes, you have to make sure that it's evenly, the temperature is evenly sort of spread over the bean. That's why the drum is better, because it does the thing.
Right, the drum does that for you. One more question before we go on. Can you tell us, by looking at the bean after roasting, if it's over roasted?
Usually you would, yes. If it's over roasted, the husk will be burnt, and the smell will smell rather burnt than chocolatey. So by looking at it, yes, you should be able to. It gives you a good indication.
Okay,
I have some
I said
here.
One more question, but I told a fib, so I'm going to ask one more question because it relates. Someone wants to know, what is the temperature for the initial heat shock?
I would say if you start off at 100 for the high quality bean at 170, 180, that gives the shock, and then go down. That will dry out the skin and do the skin work properly.
Okay, and the person that asked the question about over roasting, they've made a comment, not the husk, but the bean. And I wonder if they're roasting beans without the husk, and is that something that you recommend?
There is no dogma about it. It's yes, of course you can do it. Just you have to take the skin off before. So that's some more work, but there's nothing bad about it. You'd have to reduce a little bit the duration and the temperatures, because they'll be exposed quicker to the heat. So there's nothing wrong about it. But of course, if your bean is without the skin, you will, and if it's over roasted, you'll see it immediately. It'll be sort of black. It won't be brown. It's so dark brown that that's an indication that it's burnt. It's over roasted.
We have so many questions, but I'm going to let you go on a bit, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
I'll let you go on a bit, and then we'll come back to the questions.
Okay. All right. So the nutrients. Well, I think we've talked about it earlier, and so I don't think you have to worry about losing the antioxidants and all these things if you do it at a lower temperature for a shorter period of time. It's not a big issue. If you lose 5 or 10%, well, that's 5 or 10%, but that's doesn't mean your chocolate is worthless from the nutrient point of view. So it's not something you should worry about unless you go very to extreme durations and temperature. But I think for bean to bars, most bean to bars are buying high quality beans, which don't require such a high level of roasting, and therefore it's not really an issue. Could we have the next slide, please? Okay, so why is it an art and not a science? Well, because it can always be improved. You know what they say about paintings. Paintings are never finished. They are abandoned by the painter. So for the chocolate, it's a little bit the same thing. You could always get a bit more aromas or better ones or the ones you like. So you're starting with an agricultural product, which is inherently different every time you get it, especially for the bean to bars who are buying from small farms where the processes there might not be fully applied with rigor. So they are not sure to get the exact same thing every time. Of course, the harvest is different every year. Some years are drier. So you start with a very not undefined, but an unset product. Then you have what I call the organoleptic perceptions, what you feel and what you want. Do you want it more fruity, more floral, or do you want it more chocolatey? And depending on the characteristics of your bean to start with, you may want to roast more or less because you want to exploit the floral sense of your bean. And so it's all very much in I would say in your head, but in your decision what you want. And that's why it's not a science where you'd say you just bring the temperature so much and it will produce the result. Yes, but with many different parameters. So that's why a lot of bean to bars are a bit secretive about their profile, because they consider that it is their added value. And the more they write in their little book about the details, about the weight, the humidity, if you can measure the humidity, and all the aromas that they eventually experience once you get a chocolate bar, that is a key gold mine for them that they are very reluctant to share. Could we have the next one? Hello?
I think she's sharing it. It's just, there's a little lag. So if you want to start talking about the slide,
okay,
and then as it comes up.
So I'm sort of wrapping up here and stressing the importance of roasting. And roasting impacts first and foremost the aroma, the flavors that you'll experience in your chocolate bar. A little bit also the texture, especially if you sort of over roast, and therefore the mouthfeel that you'll get when you taste your chocolate. And I think it's essential and I have never eaten a good chocolate that was coming from beans that had not been roasted somehow, not necessarily a long time at high temperature, but they all got roasted. And the roasting is, when with poor roasting, when if you burn your beans, your good beans, you won't get a good chocolate. But on the other hand, even if you do a good roasting, you won't be able to make a good chocolate if your bean is not good, doesn't have the aroma. You'll be able to make it feel more burnt, which might be tweaked to be eatable, but it won't become a good. So you won't transform forastero, industrial forastero for a nacional. That won't work. So it's essential, but it's not everything. It does not create a good chocolate if it's not there first. Okay, I think we're close to the end of the presentation, and maybe we could open up to questions, for more questions.